Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of News Dose, where I give you all of the latest gaming news. And today has been a lot more eventful than what I was expecting. We have had a lot of things happen within the last 24 hours. Something a bit controversial is happening right now regarding the Xbox Series X, though this does affect the PlayStation 5 as well, and I think that there may be some overreactions happening regarding this news, and I will get into all that here in just a bit. We do have plenty of other things to talk about as well, including a new game announced for the Nintendo Switch coming from a big franchise. A couple of highly anticipated remasters or remakes are making their return in 2020, and more, so stay tuned for all of that as well. To kick off this episode though, let's start off with PlayStation because they had a few announcements today. As we all know, they have been incredibly silent regarding the PlayStation 5, but they decided to reveal their new branding for their first-party games, and are now calling them PlayStation Studios, and check out their brand new logo animation. This logo will display in all of their first-party games going forward, and you may be thinking, this looks oddly familiar. Well, that's because Xbox Studios has been using this logo almost exactly for the last year, and while the Xbox community loved the new logo animation, it's easy to see why because it looks excellent. So I guess PlayStation saw that love and thought, well, let's also do the same thing. Now, technically, Xbox Game Studios got this idea from Marvel, so let's be very clear about that. But I think the bigger issue here is that Xbox is not a direct competitor to Marvel, nor are they in the same industry. Kind of out of sight, out of mind type of deal. PlayStation and Xbox, though, are kind of linked hand in hand. They are in the same industry, and they're one another's biggest competitors, so to just basically be using the same logo comes off as kind of being a little bit of a ripoff, whether it's true or it's not. I've seen people say that PlayStation used this logo back in 2015, and they did use the same animation with the PlayStation symbols, but back then it did not have the PlayStation IP animating inside the logo, which is the most important part of this type of logo. Now, a year later, they did do this type of thing with Ratchet & Clank though, so they have done this at least once before, so you can't say they completely copied Xbox here. The thing is though, I would have liked to seen PlayStation be a little bit more unique here, since Xbox has been doing this for the last year, but honestly, in the grand scheme of things, this really isn't that big of a deal. It's just odd to say the least that both are just so similar now, but either way, both logos look excellent, and of course, as always, games are the most important thing here, so moving forward, let's just keep that in mind instead of focusing so much on these logos. There is no need to argue about this too much online, and I know that's exactly what's going to happen, but I mean, it is what it is. Now, Sony did have one more announcement for today, though this is in regards to the PlayStation 4. Yes, there will be a new State of Play taking place this Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This will be to showcase their upcoming first-party game, Ghost of Tsushima, where we will get an 18-minute long reveal. That actually is pretty exciting too, because we are finally going to know what this game is all about. From what we have seen of it, I do think it looks pretty good, but I still do have a lot of questions for this game. It's a game that I feel like I barely know anything about it. I know it's a big open world game, it's very cinematic as most PlayStation games are, there is a theme of revenge, and it has no waypoints, but there is still a lot I want to know about this game, especially considering it's a new IP. Luckily, this Thursday we will get that official reveal, and hopefully Ghost of Tsushima is as good as it looks. I mean, this game, from a visual standpoint, looks phenomenal, so let's just hope it plays as well as it looks. Moving on though, we had a few game announcements today, both of which are coming from very popular franchises. There was a new Harvest Moon game announced today, Harvest Moon One World. As far as I know, this will be a Nintendo Switch exclusive, and even though we don't have gameplay just yet, the word is right now that it will change up the formula for Harvest Moon quite a bit. Supposedly it will satisfy seasoned veterans of the franchise as well as newcomers. It will be using a new engine, it will have a new visual style, as well as new mechanics, so it will be interesting when we get the official unveiling of Harvest Moon One World. From the sounds of it, we will probably see this game within the next couple months, so something to look forward to there. Also, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 are getting a new remaster for the year of 2020. Yeah, you heard that right. They are bringing back the old Tony Hawk games, and the visuals are drastically improved, of course. And yeah, if you didn't actually know, back in 1999 and 2001 when these games originally released, they were incredibly fun. I remember playing them as a kid, and if I remember correctly, you could create your own levels and skater, and it was just a lot of fun. I'm a little surprised that they are remastering these games though, but the good news here is not just that they're remaking these games. The really good part about all this is that Vicarious Visions is developing this game, which also worked on Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. Now that game was excellent, so you know it's in good hands here, so for anybody who is excited for these Tony Hawk games, I think it will turn out really well. Now the question is, just how well did these games age? And we will have the answer to that here soon. In other news, The Elder Scrolls has been making waves this week. Of course, Skyrim is one of the biggest RPGs of all time. I mean, it's massively popular and has made its way to pretty much every platform since it released back in 2011, including Alexa. But 2011 was 9 years ago, and fans are starting to wonder, when are we going to see The Elder Scrolls 6? Well, according to Bethesda's Pete Hines, you might want to just sit back and relax because we are not going to hear anything about The Elder Scrolls 6 for years. First, they have to get Starfield out of the gate into players' hands, and then after that, we may start to hear about The Elder Scrolls. But if you're wanting some new announcement, it's just not going to happen anytime soon. That's too bad, really, but it is very understandable. Let's see what they can do with this new IP, though. If you do want a new Elder Scrolls game, though, and if you have a Nintendo Switch, it does appear that The Elder Scrolls Blades will be coming over to the Switch on May 14th. At first, Nintendo tweeted that Blades will be coming to the Switch, and then that got taken down, but now it is being spotted on the eShop, so it's pretty much confirmed by this point. It is a port of a free-to-play mobile game, so as far as quality, I mean, I don't really know, but it is free, so if you're really craving some new Elder Scrolls, maybe go check that out when it releases in just a few days. Now let's move on to something a little bit more controversial, because heading into next generation, the expectations are pretty high for next generation consoles, especially the Xbox Series X, a 12 teraflop beast. By this point, I think most people are expecting next generation games to run at 60 frames per second bare minimum. Even Xbox's Aaron Greenberg stated that 60 frames per second will be the new standard for the Series X. Well, a new statement by Ubisoft is claiming that Assassin's Creed Valhalla will run at least 30 frames per second. Now, it could be more than 30 frames per second, but it doesn't sound as of this moment that it will run a stable 60 frames, which has caused quite a stir among gaming fans, because a lot of people are expecting that coveted 60 frames. It is supposed to be one of the biggest changes heading into next generation, or at least that's how it's been sold to us. With Valhalla not confirming 60 frames though, that means that all next generation games on the Series X and PlayStation 5 may still not be able to push 60 frames in all of their games, which was always very likely. So I'm going to break this down as much as I can. There may be a performance mode in Valhalla that reaches 60 frames, because frankly, if you run a game that looks exactly the same as they do on current generation consoles, they should theoretically be able to run at 60 frames per second, considering the huge boost in processing power. A performance mode has not been confirmed though. As for this moment, all we really know is that it will run at the very least, keywords being at least 30 frames. The thing is though, and I've said this before, the biggest visual change for next generation games will be ray tracing, though the thing about ray tracing is that it is incredibly demanding. So if Valhalla is using ray tracing, then that could potentially keep it from hitting 60 frames, though if they have a performance mode, you may be able to turn that off in order to run 60 frames. That way you can choose what's more important to you. Now, Xbox Series X does have 52 compute units to take care of the ray tracing, while the PlayStation 5 has 36 compute units. So we will see if they can manage 60 frames along with ray tracing side by side, but we will have to see more than just one example of this. So far, most games revealed have been running at 60 frames per second so far, but we haven't really been seeing the big AAA games that are pushing visuals to their max. Now, with all that said, and this is the most important part, everybody needs to realize right now that early generation games are rarely ever showcases for new consoles. It's usually around the end of the second or even third year when you really start to see third-party companies take full advantage of new hardware. Think about it this way, Valhalla has probably been in development for at the very least 4 years. Do you think that they built it with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X in mind from the ground up? No, they probably built this game with the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 in mind, and then later on, they probably added new additions like ray tracing. The next game though, I would imagine they would take full advantage of next generation hardware, and it does take time to master new hardware as well. This is why games always ends up looking better later in the generation than early on. So I don't think you really need to overreact too much over this. There will be games that does not hit 60 frames. This will not be the only game that is sub 60. Big open world games may have the hardest time with this, and like I said, ray tracing is very demanding. This is very well known. We will have to see if these consoles can manage both ray tracing as well as 60 frames at the same time with these big open world games. Now, I do think that most Xbox Game Studios games will be able to achieve this. I also do think that pretty much every AA game and independent game will as well. The question right now, though, is about these big open world AAA games pushing the bar visually. I think some will achieve 60 and others won't, but as time goes on, I do expect visuals to improve. I'm not going to judge the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 based off of a cross-generation launch game, not from a visual standpoint at the very least. They may have some great launch games, but more than likely, they will not be visual showcases. Those games rarely take full advantage of new hardware, so keep that in mind. I will ask you though, do you think 60 frames will be achieved in these big AAA games going forward? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Peace out.